you're with us. I love the background there. And we'll get started. I want to welcome everyone to Convocation this morning. And let me give you a brief intro to our speaker today, our special guest. And if I told you everything that Dr. Turner has been involved with in his life, we might be here for an hour just going through it. A very accomplished scholar, advocate, leader. But Dr. William H. Turner is the fifth of 10 children, born in 1946 in the coal town of Lynch, Kentucky, in Harlan County. His grandfather's father, 4 uncles, and all older brother were coal miners. Bill spent his professional career studying and working on behalf of marginalized communities, helping them create opportunities in the larger world while not abandoning their important cultural ties. He is best known for his groundbreaking research on African-American communities in Appalachia, but his work is universal. As an academic and a consultant, he has studied economic systems and social structures in the urban South and Latino communities. He strives on behalf of his clients and their communities for what they want, which is prosperity and understanding and respect. Throughout his career, he has worked as a research assistant with Alex Haley. He worked with taught at Winston-Salem State University as a chair in their social sciences department. He was the interim president at Kentucky State University and a dean there, a vice president with the University of Kentucky, a distinguished professor of Appalachian Studies in Berea. And at the end of his academic career, was working with Prairie View A&M. Today, we know that we're excited because Dr. Turner is here to talk about his book, Harlan Renaissance, but also I would be amiss if I didn't say that Bill and his wife, Vivian, who is the retired president of R.J. Reynolds Foundation, Winston-Salem, they now live near their children and grandchildren in Houston. So without further ado, Dr. Turner, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, sir. Well, as you all can tell, I never could hold a job, sounds like there. But first, I want to say hello to Governor Patton. How are you, sir?
Get myself off a mood here. I know Dr. Turner very well from my time in Frankfurt. Read your book, enjoyed it. Some of it I knew, and a lot of it I learned new, but it was a good read.
I want to thank you. Back in 2002, when I was living in Winston-Salem, I got a call from Michael Alexander. Governor, you remember Mike? He was an attorney for you, and he grew up in Lynch, where I did. And he said, we want to bring you in here to be the president of Kentucky State. And so next thing I knew, I was standing with Governor Patton. And thank you so much, sir, for that opportunity. I'm fresh off the road. In fact, I came home Sunday, February 1st, as y'all know, started Black History Month again. And just as happened for the last 45 years of my life, I get to be kind of like Punxsutawney Fred, that groundhog they pull out every February and see if it's going to snow anymore. So I get to go around and talk about my work. And I tell people all the time, I can talk in September and October and in April and June, but it gets narrowed. So I left home here in Houston 14 days ago, and I flew to Knoxville and rented a car. And I drove that car 1,400 miles between Knoxville and Chattanooga and Athens and Bristol and Johnson City and Kingsport and Coburn and Wise and Harlan and Harrogate, Tennessee at LMU. And then I went over all the way across the state of Kentucky to Campbellsville University. And I was there a couple of days talking about my work. And then they even invited me out to Madisonville. And I ended up on the Ohio River in Paducah last Friday. And I drove from Paducah by way of Nashville into Knoxville, and I got on a plane and I flew back to Houston the day before yesterday, I think it was. And I had a wonderful time talking about my work. And I appreciate the receptions I've had visiting these basically what you might call Appalachian colleges, except for when I was out in Campbellsville and Paducah. And I'm going to leave at home again on Sunday, and I'm going to go to Huntington to talk about my book at Marshall. And then I'm going to go and get with some United Mine Worker people up in Wheeling, West Virginia. And then I'll come back down to Concord College in Athens, West Virginia. And I'll end up at Ashland Community College, which is not too far from Pikeville. Last time I checked. I'll be up the Hillbilly Highway a lot the next week or two. So thank y'all very much. How do I get started? Rob, can you let me share my screen? If I can make this thing work now, boy, I'm always having, oh yeah. Yeah, if you'll let me share, I'm gonna figure out how to get my
You should be
screen
ready
up.
to go now. Should be ready to go now. You should be able to share now.
Okay, let me see if I can find what I want to share here. Okay, can you all see that?
Not yet.
Oh boy, I knew it's gonna do that way. Let me see what I should do then. Share screen. Oh God. I was able to do this the other day. Oh, I'm not sharing yet, huh? Jesus, what is wrong with this thing? Okay, how's that? Can you see that now?
Yes, it's starting to share your screen. There it is.
As you see, recently I was in your neck of the woods at Big Sandy Community College. And so that is what I talked about when I was at Big Sandy, and my screen is not working. There it is. Can you see my book there now?
Yes.
Okay. And so here's why I wrote it. I wrote it because I was noticing over the last 30 or 40 years that when you go to places in Eastern Kentucky, like Pikeville, and like Hazard and Jenkins and Wheelwright and Harlan and Middlesboro and Benham and Lynch and Cumberland and Whitesburg, or as they say in Wattsburg, a lot of those Black communities, those old hollers are disappearing. And so I wanted my book to say, here's what happened to those people. I also want to say to young people that it's important that you interview your elders and get to know something about where they came from and what their record is. And certainly for Black kids in the mountains I've talked to, I try to say to them, in the long run, if you'll get a superior education and there's not much people can do against you when you have superior education. That's what I've tried to teach through my book. So my book talks about the footprints of Black people, not in the sands of time necessarily, but on the mountaintops. Who were they? Where did they come from? What did they contribute? And why is that history so important? That's a picture of the man named Carter G. Woodson, who went to Berea College in 1899. And he is the one who kind of came up with this idea of let us stop and take notice of the contributions of Black people to America and to the world. And he did so with an organization called the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. And he came up with Black History Month, or what he called Negro History Week, in 1926. That man right there, Ed Cabell, dedicated his life to collecting and archiving all these stories. And so Ed and I worked together, and we wrote a book in 1985 called Blacks in Appalachia. And Ed grew up in McDowell County, West Virginia. Ed grew up in and around a place called Keystone in West Virginia. That young lady on the left there and that young man, William Isom, they have dedicated their lives to sharing these stories of Blacks in Appalachia through the East Tennessee Public Broadcasting System. They have a podcast and a website and a lot of exciting things called Blacks in Appalachia, Black in Appalachia. That's in Quiche Alamin, PhD from University of Tennessee, and Bill Isom. Crystal Dawn Good, there's a lot out of West Virginia on Blacks in Appalachia, a fantastic person. Another person that we need to get to know, there's a book there about a place not far from Pikeville called Black Huntington. Fascinating work done by my friend Cicero Fain out of Marshall University. Cicero grew up in Huntington. So getting started, let's do a little bit about me. What do I know about Blacks in Appalachia? There's a photograph on the left there. That's my father. My father is dead now. Daddy lived to be 72. He was born in 1917 in Wise County, Virginia, in Coburn. And I have shown there a pay stub that Dad got when he came out of that pay stub reflects his money, $47.50 he brought home after working for 2 weeks. And that check stub is drawn on December 31st, 1946. I was 6 months old at that time. I'll be 76 my next birthday. The picture from the cover of my book is myself on the right, and it goes up to our oldest sister, Peggy, who is no longer with us. That picture was taken when we were getting ready to go to Sunday school somewhere in 1952. I have a stair step pictured on there because we were called stair step children. I don't know if any of you on here are from a family like that, but my mama had 5 children in 7.5 years. And I asked my dad one time about that. I said, Dad, I don't want to get into the birds and the bees with you, but how in the world did mama have that many children in such a short time? And he said, well, every morning the train would come up the hill, making all that noise and screaming and whistling and chinging and chuckling and wake everybody up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And he said it was too early to get up and it was too late to go back to sleep. And I said, oh, shame on you, Pop. But that's how he explained it. My mother had 3 more children. I have 3 younger brothers. And then our parents adopted the sons of our oldest sisters, the 2 on the left. Our parents adopted their sons because they left home after high school in 1958 and 1960, respectively. And they moved up to New Jersey to find work. And they had kids and they got a divorce. And my father said, no boy should be raised without a daddy. And so him and mama adopted our 2 nephews, both of whom are in their 40s now, but Dad, that's the way he rolls. So everybody knows who are Appalachians and who, where they are, but it can be a bit confusing. As we all know, I just got off an hour-long Zoom, about 5 minutes. The reason I was late coming to this Zoom is I was on the line in a Zoom in preparation for a presentation I would do Thursday with the Appalachian Regional Commission. Mrs. Gail Manchin has me on with the ARC staff on Thursday. And as you all know, the area in white in that map of the United States there, or the East Coast anyway, the white part is Appalachia. There's what we're talking about. You can see part of it there. Sorry, I have Prestonsburg on there. You can see that, Arlington, and I think that red star in the middle there is where I thought the Jeannie Wilder State Park was when I was up in the area of Big Sandy. So as you see, Appalachia is a really widespread place. For example, I see my friend Emily Hudson on here, Emily Hudson Jones, and Emily went to Berea College. But interestingly enough, at Berea College, the vast majority of the students, Black students over the last 50 years have come from Birmingham, Alabama, Jefferson County in particular. That's Birmingham. And it's sometimes hard to convince those kids when they come up there from Tupelo that they're from Appalachia, because they never think of themselves as Appalachia. So last week, as I was telling you all, I was in a trail through there for some 1,400 miles. In fact, this time next month in March, I hope to be in Morgantown at the annual meetings of the Appalachian Studies Association in West Virginia. I don't have to go through this much because the governor knows his region very well. It includes all of West Virginia, New York, South Carolina, Tennessee, the Appalachian region, according to the ARC. There's our Appalachian counties. The yellow part is Kentucky. Kentucky's Appalachian counties, I think there's 52 of them. It literally says about more than half of the counties in Kentucky are in Appalachia. And sometimes the other day when I was out in Campbellsville, Campbellsville is not too far from Edmonson County and Barron County. So as you see, certain parts of the Appalachian region in Kentucky are west of Louisville, way out near Hopkinsville. But there was a time not long ago when nobody wanted to be caught dead in Appalachia, let alone identify or be an Appalachian. There are a group of journalists who call themselves Expactor, and they focus their work on Appalachia because they left and some of them came back home. For example, right now, that county number 2 there is Youngstown, Ohio, which recently became an Appalachian county. I never thought I would see Appalachia on Lake Erie and also on Lake Cumberland, but it is. When you think about the fact that certain parts of Mississippi, they Appalachianized Mississippi at a point because part of it was how do we get the money? We don't care how we get it if we can get some of it. The fastest growing population in Appalachia right now, I call it between cornbread and tortillas. Do they still have a restaurant in Hazard, Emily, called Aze Grande? I think that means Big Blue. So if you can imagine, the Mexican people who moved into Perry County knew that folks had a tongue for tortillas. And so the biggest restaurant in Hazard is a Hispanic restaurant. And in fact, the fastest growing population in East Tennessee, particularly in Morristown and Rogersville, are people who were born and raised in El Salvador and Mexico. So 2 of Kentucky's best writers have now called themselves, they do their work on Appalachia. One is Frank X. Walker, who did a book called Appalachia. Frank kind of renamed us. And the Appalachian poets. Bell Hooks, as y'all know, died a couple months ago. Bell was from Hopkinsville, but Bell considered herself an Appalachian because she said there was just so much about Hopkinsville and rural areas where she lived down there, which reminded her of what happened when she moved into Berea 11 or 12 years ago. I always teased Bell and said, Bell, Hopkinsville is closer to Nashville than it is to Hazard, but we go on. Frank X. Walker has this brand called Appalachia. I asked my mother one time if she was an Appalachian. And Mama said, Bill, you know darn well I'm a Baptist. Most people in Appalachia do not call themselves Appalachians. They rarely ever refer to that term. That's something that city folks use. Y'all saw that movie called Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance, that book that came out around the time President Trump was running for office. And the Andy Griffin shows, Ron Howard made a film with Glenn Close that some of you may have seen called Hillbilly Elegy. And in fact, Hillbilly Elegy raised once again some of the worst stereotypes you ever heard of white people in Appalachia. I love that picture right there because it says, I didn't grow up in any poor community. I grew up in Lynch. That's the street I grew up on, right there in Lynch. In October 1984, I took that picture. That's my grandmama's house just below the comma between Lynch and Kentucky. And I thought that was the most beautiful place in the world. And I used to walk down that street every day of my life. And that picture is, that's why I chose that photograph, because I think it goes against the stereotypes. Lynch was a model coal town and a beautiful little space. I learned a lot of what I learned from these 2 gentlemen here. John Hope Franklin on the left top with me in 1988. He got an honorary doctorate amongst the other 212 honorary doctorates he received. He was receiving one that day from Berea College. John Stevenson, who was the president of Berea College, introduced me to Alex Haley back in 1980. And I got to work with Mr. Haley for about 10 years before he died in 1991. Those are my grandchildren standing in front of the Alex Haley statue, which is in Morningside Park in Knoxville, Tennessee. As y'all might know, Alex had a farm, 155 acres. When he made all that money writing Roots, he moved to East Tennessee. He moved to a place called Clinton. And he had a farm across from the farm of the Museum of Appalachia, founded by John Rice Irving, there in the area of Knoxville. That's my granddaughter, Africa, standing at the Appalachian African American Culture Center in Pennington Gap, Virginia. I was one of the founding members of their board. And that's that school above the photograph of my daughter. That is the Appalachian Center. I was there last week this time, and I was visiting in East Tennessee. I drove over to see my friends at the Appalachian Center. just a picture to demonstrate James Branscombe, a Berea College graduate. Berea's all over Appalachia. We'll know something about Appalachia, just go to Berea College. But James Branscombe, who graduated Berea College in 1968, wrote that sentence there, and he said the most underlooked, consistently overlooked, and underserved people in the region are the Black people of Appalachia, that no agency, journalist had documented their presence and the needs of these people, let alone to describe how they had to live. That's my dear mentor, John Stevenson, who's the president of Berea College for 10 years. John taught me at the University of Kentucky when I left Lynch in 1966. I went to a community college in Cumberland, Kentucky in Harlan County. In 1966, I went to UK, where I met John, who became my mentor. There needs to be more people in Appalachia like John. And when I got ready to go to Notre Dame to graduate school, John said to me, Bill, you should devote your life to the study of African Americans in Appalachia. And I said, no, buddy, I don't think so. Because all I had read in Harry Carter's Night Comes to the Cumberlands was that Appalachia people had a dysfunctional culture. They were just banjo playing, family feuding, Scotch, Irish hillbillies who toted guns. They were everything from being incestuous and ornery and semi-literate, toothless people. And some of the worst stereotypes Jeff Foxworthy ever made were about white people in Appalachia. You might be a redneck if. I see some of y'all shaking your heads. Good, that's good. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The Beverly Hillbillies, who didn't see a film called Deliverance, 1972, Ned Beatty. It also underscored some of these stereotypes we're still trying to live down in Appalachia. The Hee-Haw, the Beverly Hillbillies, the Rebel Flags, white Appalachians might be the only people you can make fun of and not be accused of using a racial slur or being prejudiced. To my point, Quick Path Through the Mountains, that's a Black mountain colored school that was in Everett, Kentucky in 1925. Those three Black girls on the picture at the bottom right were walking past the Tipple at Lynch in 1944. And once again, that's where I'm talking about, the coal camps of East Kentucky. Governor Patton, there's one of the most famous people nobody ever heard of very much in Pikeville, Kentucky. Her name is Effie Waller Smith, a fantastic poet. That's why I always tell Frank X. Walker and the Appalachian poets, if they want to know something about poetry, go read Effie Waller Smith, who wrote poetry for Harper's Magazine in 1897. And she grew up on Clow Creek in Pikeville, Kentucky. And I hope the college there will embrace her and hold her up as one of their own, because she represented this region in New York City and California and ended up dying relatively obscure in Madison, Wisconsin. Effie Waller Smith. So how these people get up in there when coal was king, they came up out of Alabama into the mountains of East Kentucky, where you see those 2 feet right there. There's a wonderful book called African American Miners and Migrants, done by 2 scholars, Tom Wagner and Phil Obermiller at the University of Cincinnati. And I wrote the foreword to that book 20 years ago. I commend it to you because it's about the Eastern Kentucky Social Club, a confederation of Black people out of East Kentucky who have 15 chapters around the country. And we've met every year for 52 years. We all gathered from Hazard and Lynch and Benham and Jenkins and Harlan and you name it. We all gathered the last time before COVID in Detroit at the Renaissance Center in 2019. Everybody should know the places on the left. That's where the Black people in Central Appalachia who migrated to Greater Cincinnati. They moved from Benham and Black Mountain and Corbin and Cumberland and London and East Bernstead and Everett and Hazard and Jenkins and Lynch and McRoberts and Middlesboro and Pikeville and Pineville and Wheelwright. And they also came out of Appalachia and Abingdon and Big Stone Gap and Bluefield and Castlewood. You can read. No use me going down that. And the biggest coal camps of Black people, of course, were in Kimball and Keystone and Welch and Gary and Beckley and Bluefield and Princeton. And the biggest footprint in all those places was the largest company in the United States at the time, and that was United States Steel. The other day, I did an interview in the Carnegie Hotel in Johnson City, and I said, isn't this interesting? Andrew Carnegie made all this money in Appalachia when he started those coal companies. That was my beautiful hometown, Lynch, and that picture was taken in 1951, but it looked like that recently, and I think that's the most beautiful tipple in the world. That was in Lynch. Lynch had the largest coal tipple in the world. Lynch was the greatest coal town in the world going back in the 1920s. The three men in front of the Black Mountain Corporation, that picture was taken in Black Mountain in Harlan County, Kentucky. And there's a Black neighborhood in McRoberts in Letcher County. And as you can see, the Black people that I write about and read about and try to study about and interact with to this very day, they were descendants of slaves, primarily out of Alabama. They migrated in the 1880s into the mountains of the South. And they came from a rural place. They were sharecroppers, and they came to these industrial spaces in Pikeville and in Inez. And their largest numbers were in West Virginia. But presently, there are less than 20,000 Black people in Eastern Kentucky and in Southwest Virginia and Southern West Virginia put together. A voting scene in Lynch in 1951, a family in Hazard 80 years ago, and Lynch Colored Public School that I attended. My mama went to the first grade there, and I went to the first grade there. And that building still stands. It houses the Eastern Kentucky Social Club. Emily might know these people here from Hazard. They were three preachers, and they worked on a place called Town Mountain in Perry County. And one of my uncles was a Gandhi dancer. The guys who put the railroads through the mountains of the South, the C&O, the L&N, they were all, that track was laid by Black men from Corbin up to Hazard and to Lynch in the 1900s. The Black people of Appalachia had the same values as the white people of Appalachia. They are hardworking. They put their families first. They are strong religious people. They believed in achievement academically. They were neighborly and community-minded. They were very patriotic. I'm named after a Buffalo soldier, Hobart Hampton Turner. My name is William Hobart Turner. That was my father's brother. He was a Buffalo soldier, shot down in World War II as an aviator in Italy. And as you know, the Buffalo Soldiers was an all-Black regiment that started in First World War, and my uncle died in it in 1945. They were very honest people, very neighborly people, and they had a sense of humor. You can't take yourself too seriously if you're from Pikeville, because that's the way we roll. That's a street in Harlan County where I grew up. We loved those mountains before it was politically correct to do so. My father went in that hole right there, Portal 31 in Lynch in Harlan County, which is now a tourist scene. There's 9 Black men that I grew up around. I knew them. They had 54 children between them, and they fed them very well. And that photo was taken when I was 6 years old. They're the last 5 Black coal miners in Harlan County, Patsy and Ricky and Jerry and Drina. I knew them when they were born. And recently, I took that picture in 1995. And recently, through the help of Governor Patton, in fact, that book right there called the Kentucky African American Encyclopedia featured a photograph of those same Black coal miners next to, what's her name there? Oh God, she was a Louisville senator. Grace, I think was her first name. There's a school I went to, the Lynch Colored School. They had a etched in concrete to let us know we were colored every day. My mama played at that little church right there for 47 years. That church is in Benham, Kentucky. And that's what ran most of the Black people out of the coal mine. That's called a continuous miner. My father sued United States Steel in 1969, and he got a job running one of those. And he went from making $11,800 a year to making $58,000 a year. And he thought he died and gone to heaven. And he said, the only problem, Billy, is that machine right there put 300 boys out of work. There's your county, Pike County, between 1940 and 2008. And as you see, in 1940, the Black population of your county had 70,000 people. Pike County was larger, and only counties that had more people than Pike County in 1940 was Fayette County and Jefferson County. And look at it now. You can get all the Black people in Pike County in one building. Same in Harlan County. The Black population decreased by 90%. If the population decrease had applied to the total population of Harlan County, as it applied to the demise of the Black people of Harlan County, there wouldn't be any people in Harlan County today. That's my dad again. As you know, they don't need him anymore because coal is now mined largely by mountaintop removal. And if you visited Inman, Virginia lately, over the mountain from Harlan County, you'll know what I mean. We lived in company houses. We went to company schools. We worked for a company according to the company rules. We drank company water and we used company lights, and the company preacher taught us what the company said was right. That's the way it worked. And they used to tell us, no matter what they can take from you, that company, they can't take your pride away and whatever is inside your head. And so now much of the United States, with the dominance of big companies, as you know, the largest employer in East Kentucky is Walmart. The largest employer in Southwest Virginia is Walmart. And when Walmart leaves, buddy, it leaves a big hole everywhere. Where did our people go? They went to Chattanooga, they went to Cincinnati, they went to Lexington, they went to Louisville, they went to Atlanta, they went to Pittsburgh. Some of them even went back to Birmingham. But they certainly, the greatest migration now out of West Virginia and southeastern Kentucky is in Charlotte, North Carolina. There's that book again called African American Miners and Migrants. I commend you to it. There's another graphic of the population decrease of Harlan County. Today, there's 26,000 people in Harlan County. And when I was 15 years old, Harlan County has 70,000 people. And what I worry about today is, what is the nature of life for Black people in Pikeville? What is the nature of life like right now for Black people in Harlan? Who are the role models? I had all these role models because we had all these colored schools, which meant we had all these colored teachers. You can only find 7 Black teachers in all of Harlan County today. I don't know how many Black people teach school in Pikeville, but it's probably not many more than that. And what is the nature of race relations in Pike County? And what is the fact that 90% of the presidential vote went to Donald Trump? What does that mean? And what about the scourge of methamphetamines and heroin and opioids in the mountains of the South today? So there's that book. It took me a whole semester to do what I've said now in about 35 minutes. And that's a book I wrote in 1985. And so I tried to go through in less than an hour, where it usually takes me a semester to teach. And there's this new book called The Harlan Renaissance, where I try to recount some of the stories of Black people in the mountains of the South. And once again, I end with, as I said up at Bluegrass, I thank you. And once again, that's the territory we talk about. Okay. I need a bottle of water if one of you all can pass me one through this screen here, and I'll take any questions you have right now. Thank you, Mr. Music.
Well, Dr. Turner, I really appreciate you giving us a whirlwind tour of Appalachia. But in your latest book, I wonder if there would be a story that you would like to highlight of a person that you lift up in that book.
Oh boy, I mentioned John Stevenson, the president of Berea College, at the time that he died. But I met him in 1966, and I mention him often when I'm doing staff development conferences at colleges like U-Pike, for that matter. And I often say, I wish there were more people like John Stevenson, because John did not patronize me as a smart colored boy, and that he would somehow pat me on the head and say, "Oh, that's good enough for a Black boy, Bill." He never did that to me. He held me to a very high standard. And he got out of his own comfort zone as a white man in 1966, and he dealt with me like I'm going to deal with you like I deal with my own children. And one of the best things he ever did for me, because so often people who consider themselves progressive and liberal can fall into the trap of also being patronizing. And so John, I wrote a paper in 1966 about Malcolm X, one of the most, quote, militant people ever lived. And I really didn't know what I was writing about in 1966. I was only 20 years old. Malcolm had been killed the year before. And I wrote this 9-page paper that I just thought was the most eloquent thing I've ever did. And John, as we used to say, he bled blue, he bled red on my paper. And on the bottom of the last sheet, he wrote the following: "Dear Bill, I thank you so much for this paper. I have needed to change the bottom of my bird cage for the last 2 weeks. And that woke me up. I said, God, you're supposed to be my friend, man. He said, I am your friend. And that's why you're going to do this again. Now, over the 45 years that I taught college, I wrote that on probably 1,000 students' papers, that same line. And they would come back and say, how could you do that to me? And so the influence of a teacher is infinite. You never know how long it lasts. So John Stevenson was as close to me as my own father, and I loved him dearly. That's one person I would speak about. A teacher, a white teacher who engages the way those two guys did in Tom Sawyer, or whatever his name was, Jim and the black guy, won't come to me. Mark Twain's book. Like the lawyer in To Kill a Mockingbird. You got to come out of that white comfort zone, and that's what John did for me. He introduced me to Alex Haley. He helped me so much that I just can't name it. If you got time, I'd like to mention another person that means so much to me, and let me see if I can go back to that slide. Oh boy, here we go. This is a slide I would like to, that's my mother. You might notice in her left hand a cigarette. You see that cigarette Mom's hand? Mom died of lung cancer. And Mom smoked cigarettes, she said, from the times she started off smoking rabbit tobacco when she was 10. And then she started smoking cigarettes, and oh God. Anyway, my mother and I had a to-do once, because my wife and I, we gave our children names that are derived from East Africa. Our 51-year-old daughter is named Keisha Tawala. Our 47-year-old son is named William Kenyatta. Our 41-year-old son is named Hodari. Hodari means man-child. Kenyatta means the drummer. Keisha means a girl born on Tuesday. My mama said to me when we first brought the one named Keisha home 52 years ago, 51 years, when it all came home for Christmas, and Mom said, what kind of crazy name is Keisha? I never heard anything like that. What's wrong with y'all? Why'd y'all give those kids those crazy African names? It's just gonna make them stand out like that. And I took a deep breath. I didn't say a word. That was Mama. We were in Mama's kitchen. A few years later, we brought home our son, and Mama said, what's your name this one? And we said, his name is William Kenyatta. She said, oh my Lord. There you go with that. I ain't gonna say the word she said, that blank again. 10 years later, we brought another child home. She said, what's his name? And we said, his name is Hodari. And I said, Mom, don't start it. I don't want to hear this no more. And then I said, you know why? Look at these names you gave your children. And I put my hand on the shoulder of my oldest sister. My second oldest sister. Mom named her Marie Antoinette. Think about it. I said, Mama, you don't know jack about the French Revolution, but you named your child Marie Antoinette. What kind of craziness was that? And then I put my hand on my oldest brother's shoulder. And I said, what'd you name him? His name is Irving Rudolph. You know why you named him Irving Rudolph, Mama? Because you love the music of Irving Berlin. Remember you told me that? Mama was a pianist. She never went to school. Mama went to the 9th grade, 10th grade, married Dad when she was 15, 16. And I said, and you named him Rudolph because you said there was this famous actor named Rudolph Valentino. I said, now, isn't that pitiful? You name your children after these white people you'll never meet. They have no history for you. But then she went so far as to name my next brother under me, God rest his soul. You know what she named him? Mark Anthony Turner. Mark Anthony. Mama, you know nothing about Brutus and Julius Caesar. So black people, so you have to remember, I had grown up during the civil rights, Black is Beautiful years, and people began to celebrate blackness and black history and African roots. And my wife and I had been to Kenya and to Tanzania and to Ghana and to South Africa. We had seen some things my mama could never imagine. So it was second nature for us to name our children what we did. And then to end this story, 22 years ago, we brought our granddaughter home. The whole family comes home and somebody has a baby. We all have to go and meet at mama's house. And so we brought our grandbaby home, who was the child of my son named Hodari. Mama was dying of cancer, laying in a bed in the living room with an oxygen tank hissing. Her arms were no bigger than a broomstick. And my son handed her this 1 or 2 month old girl. And mama said, if y'all excuse me, what kind of damn African name you give this one? And my son said, Grandma, it's not an African name. Her name is Africa. And Ma said, Lord have mercy, Jesus. So that's a story that's in my book.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. That's a fantastic story there. I wonder, for those who have been listening to Dr. Turner, questions that have been stirred inside of you that you would like to ask now, we leave the floor to you.
Yes, I have a question. May I ask it, please?
Go for it.
Yes, Dr. Turner, you talked about the stereotypes of Appalachians, of all races, as ignorant and, toothless and kind of illiterate and all that. And then you also talked about the opioid pandemic and how those are just stereotypes, and we're pretty well one of the only groups of people that you're allowed to make fun of in that way. In my own family, I've seen a lot of it. Like, I mean, I have people who have been really, really affected by opioid abuse and alcoholism. I have people in my family that don't have teeth because they don't have good medical care,
Right.
and they can't afford it because we're very, we have a lot of problems politically and things that really, really affect people here. And because they choose to vote for Donald Trump and people like that, they suffer even worse for it. What would you say? I mean, I even have, like myself, I've played a banjo many times. I play a fiddle. A lot of those stereotypes, like, they have elements of truth, but they're misconstrued in that we don't see, or society in general doesn't see us as victims of some of these things that they blame us for. What would you say that we should do in order to not disparage ourselves, but also not turn a blind eye away from certain parts of our heritage, like, playing the banjo or admitting that we have opioid problems here, and that because of our economic situation, a lot of people here are very poor. How do we address these things without furthering stereotypes?
Okay.
And also, thank you for your talk today.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. I have to admit something. If I could, I don't see it. I was leaning against my screen. I don't know if you all saw me kind of doing like this, but my hearing aids are behind me here on the shelf, and I forgot to put them in when we started this morning. So I'm not sure I heard all of your questions. Rob, if you could, and it may be my computer, but could you repeat the knuckle of the question for me?
Yeah, Norman was just sharing with us about the idea of stereotypes and the stereotypes of Appalachia that you highlighted. And he said even inside of his own system and around him, he's seen pieces of these. So how do we acknowledge what he believes are some truths, but in lifting up parts of our culture, like playing the banjo, etc., without perpetuating these horrific stereotype ideas?
Okay, hold on 1 second.
Thank you, Father Ross.
Can you see that right there? Everybody see my banjo, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I won't play a tune for you, but my grandfather, my father's father, played a banjo. And I can remember by closing my eyes right now and seeing him with the proverbial corncob pipe in his mouth when I was about 5 or 6 years old in Coburn, Virginia. And, somewhere along the line, and I think it had a lot to do with the people on the West Coast, the ones with the cameras, and the ones on the East Coast, that everybody, everywhere probably, in order to affirm their own being, they have to have someone against whom they can compare themselves. It's called having the other. You remember a book in the 1960s, maybe 65 or so, It came out right after Harry Carter wrote Night Comes to the Cumberlands. There was a man named Michael Harrington. He wrote a book called The Other America. And in that book, he wrote about, hey, Sarah Rattlers, boy, you any kin to the Rattlers in Eastern Kentucky? Brent?
I mean, probably. I don't know right off, but probably. I'm from the Elkhorn City area.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, when I saw Ratliff, I said, wasn't that somebody who came to Brett? But anyway, I got off the point. But this matter of stereotyping is just a common part of our society. And let me tell you, back to the banjo, I've been blessed here recently to be part of a program called sepia tones, SEPIA, which basically just means earth colored. And me and a guy named Professor Ethnomusicologist at East Tennessee State, we're writing a book on the role and the influence of Blacks in traditional Appalachian music, right? So nobody stereotypically associates banjo playing with Black people. But the fact of the matter is, as Alex Haley pointed out, in Roots, that was an instrument called a KROE, a crow, which came to the Americas with the slaves in the 1500s. And so when you look at the minstrelly and the minstrel singers who used to put blackface on and play these tunes, Blacks have been involved in living in Appalachia, I mean, as long as anybody. And so the music itself, when you look at the Grand Ole Opry, very few people know anything about how stereotypical that is, because they always present the Grand Ole Opry as a white space, when in fact there were Blacks who were involved in the Grand Ole Opry from its inception. So for most of my adult life, I have not lived in Kentucky. I lived the longest in Kentucky after I left in 1960, almost after I left in 1966 and went to Lexington. I guess that was still in Kentucky, though, wasn't it? But when I left Kentucky and went to graduate school in 1968, I've lived outside of Kentucky most of my adult life. But every September, usually in September, I find some excuse to say to my wife, and she'll say, "Oh, don't tell me, you're going home," because it means so much to me. Many of you have probably heard this story about how a fellow died and went to heaven, and he got there, and Gabriel was giving him the orientation to heaven, and he saw a bunch of people, Black and white, that were behind a cage in heaven. They had them barred in like they were in jail. And this guy said to Gabriel, "Well, this is a beautiful place you got here in heaven, but why are those people over there behind that barrier?" And he said, "Oh, all of them are from Eastern Kentucky, and we have to lock them up on the weekends because they all want to go home." Who doesn't want to go home on the weekends? And so I think that one of the stereotypes we need to keep pushing is that even when people leave the mountains, they never leave home, because there's something about growing up in the Appalachian, just the geographical space itself, and the beauty of what we call home is something to be celebrated. So I try to go somewhere home every fall of the year, because Appalachia, from Culloway and Asheville to Pikeville to Berea to London, you name it, to Mount Airy, they have Appalachian festivals every fall of the year. And you go there and you say, wow, people are keeping it alive. And that's what I've been trying to do, is to say to my friends who for whatever reason had to move to Columbus and Cleveland and all these other promised lands, come back home in the fall. That's when everybody comes back. And so the stereotype of what we didn't like is defied by what we do. I also want to say something about the diversity of our families. I mean, in my own families, you can go to a family reunion and you'll run into some people my mother used to tell people, now y'all keep calling him Dr. Turner. He's not a real doctor like his cousin is, you know, because I have a cousin who's a real doctor as far as mama's concerned. She's a gynecologist. But there are a lot of real doctors and real lawyers and dentists at the family reunion. And we have lawyers and we have accountants. We have my brother who owns a seafood import export company in New Orleans, and his son went to Stanford and got an MBA from Columbia. And we had these 3 nieces who all graduated from Hampton University in Virginia. But when we all get together, in some parts of the 60 or 100 people who might be at the family reunion, there's somebody over there that's on drugs. You know, we got some family members whose dental situation ain't the best in the world, but we don't put them down. You know, it's like I have a story in my book about my brother. He's dead now, but he was a coal miner. He was known to drink a little bit and act a clown. And somebody who didn't know that all of us were related made a comment about my brother and said something like, he's a real fool, ain't he? And my cousin, who's a doctor, says, but he's our fool. And I think everybody in Appalachia, not everybody, but people in Appalachia generally are that way. We know that everybody in our family didn't get to go to college. Everybody in our family doesn't live in a nice home or have 2 or 3 cars. But at the same time, we know that there are certain things, even inside that controversial concept of the 1690 Project, critical race theory. Inside there's something called systemic bias. And if you take the word bias off of it, we know that there are some elements of the economic system in the United States that is systemically biased. And what it does to Black and white people is that when the system breaks down or the system makes major transformations, it leaves a lot of people out economically. So that you see in the inner cities of this country, where I live here in Houston, every morning you pick up the paper, every afternoon you watch the news, and you'll see these horror stories, crime, drug addiction, all the associated pathologies. And we associate those with the inner cities where the economic transformations have left a lot of people out. Well, take that over to Elkhorn City, right? Take that over to Harlan City, take that over to any towns in Appalachia where you see Oxycontin and methamphetamines eating people alive. It is essentially a function of the economic system that strains these people's lives. And everybody knows that drug use at one level is a coping mechanism. And we need to call it a health problem rather than a criminal justice problem. And so these are very complex issues, and they have a lot to do with everybody on this screen, I bet you, hears in East Kentucky all the time, what's after coal? You know, and we see people trying to come up with just transitions to the next economy. And in order to get there, or before we get there, some people will be victimized by the vacuum in the economic system right now. Heck, when my brother died with a high school education, running a long wall miner in Harlan County, he was making $93,000 a year. It's hard to replace that kind of money for a guy with a 12th grade education living outside of Hassel. And those fellas love their pickup trucks, and those trucks cost a lot more than they can afford now. And before you know it, the vacuum has been filled with this underground economy based around the sale and production of and the sale of illicit drugs. And as you know, Big Pharma at one point, somehow 30 million Oxycontin pills were getting into Bell County every 2 months, 30 million pills. Now, that's systemic somewhere. So that what we must do in the organizations inside the mountains, where we see this with our people, is to figure out ways to help people through this transition. Because I believe that America is all with all of its warts, is still the best place in the world where people can recover and imagine another Renaissance in the mountains. I think we'll do it.
I think that is so helpful and insightful, and really kind of a theme today I hear is the idea of telling the truth about Appalachia, telling the truth about history, telling the truth even right now of your critique about kind of the drug epidemic and health epidemic that we have here in Appalachia. Mm-hmm. So I want to honor everyone's time because we are very close to the 12 o'clock hour. I know people go off to class, but Dr. Turner, we can't thank you enough for this great presentation, for your lifelong scholarship and work, and for sharing with us today. Thank you so much for your time. I
thank you all. And by the way, it's Reverend music, is it not?
You just call me Rob.
Reverend Rob. I'd like to do this. If anybody wants a copy of these slides, I'll send it to you, and they get in touch with you, and you'll have it.
Okay, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you again, maybe in person next time.
I hope so. I got to see Governor Paul Patton again in person. Thank you, sir.
Take care.
Thank you so much. See you, Amanda.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, bye now, everybody. God bless you.